One, two, three. Live after dark. What it is. Where should we start? How about Cloud Foundry Summit?
Summit's going to be huge.
What's going on over there?
Well, I think you should tell the story first, Andrew. Like how you got involved started with the very first platform. Remember that?
The very first platform.
Yeah, do you remember that? Why don't you tell that story for a second?
My friend was working on this crazy project called Cloud Foundry. And he's like, hey, we want to have an event and we have no idea what we're doing. Will you help us? And I'd been doing the DevOps days and organized some Puppet camps and Agile Roots and a bunch of other conferences, and I had some opinions about how to do it. I said, sure, I'll help you. I'll help you for a sushi dinner.
That's right. And I took you to Zushi Puzzle and had omakase from Roger.
Roger, with the full spread.
Yep. And then you kind of got pulled into the tribe.
That it seems like you had a plan, actually.
Yeah. It was $480 worth of omakase sushi, though, so I'm still, that was still pretty.
I think you actually owe me another one. I think you're down one.
Yeah, so maybe we'll get into Summit for a second, but we got some new faces on. Why don't we let people introduce themselves to tonight's casual conversation?
Hello, new people.
You got Ben Black on the left, needs no introduction. Des, you want to introduce yourself? I know you from Twitter. It's great to meet you in real life.
Yeah, hi. I'm from Sydney. I work for a company called the Frame Group. Traditionally, they've had a 14-year history of building things you can drop on your foot. I've been there for about 6 months, and I joined them to establish a cloud practice, a big data and analytics practice, and a digital transformation practice.
Wow.
I have a hackathon that I'm running for a month with Hewlett and Packard.
That sounds like Pivotal's pitch right there.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm doing a hackathon here with a Cloud Foundry platform that is built for me. Yeah, so that's me.
Cool. Great to meet you. Ed.
Say hi to the folks at home.
Hi, people at home. I'm Ed. I've apparently been lurking Cloud Foundry for quite some time.
What do you do during the day?
During the day, I work at a company called Real Self in beautiful, sunny Seattle, where we do sort of like Yelp for cosmetic surgery and dentistry, leaking up sort of a social network for people that are looking for those kinds of services, content delivery, social networking, many different aspects to the business there.
Right.
And I'm a DevOps person there, so that's the business, and I'm, magical operations dude.
So you own your availability.
Yes, very tightly tied to my employment.
The availability owns you.
Yeah. We have an agreement, the availability and I.
And I see Matt Cowger, infamous field engineering wizard of EMC, if I remember correctly.
So that means I don't have to do my own intro then.
Or you could still do your own intro.
I do. I'm an SE for EMC, responsible for much of what the SEs do with Platform 3. And I'm the person that gets to go to a conference.
Is he cutting out on everyone?
Yeah, I think we've lost him.
We lost him. Man down.
Yeah, it's like Casablanca. You may notice on After Dark that human life is cheap.
It's live.
Try again.
Sure, we'll give that one more try. I'm the EMC SE that gets to go to RedisConf, and then people ask me who I work for, and I tell them, and they say, "Who's that? I've never heard of that company."
Yes,
so you're a very third platform leading guy from EMC, which is awesome.
Yep.
It's just a $60 billion company that like probably stores all your stuff. It's cool.
And And then Ramiro, first time, but
Yeah.
big time player in the Cloud Foundry world.
Oh, thank you, thank you. No, I'm just an infrastructure guy, or as I like to quote Steven Seagal, I'm just a lowly cook. I work at Pivotal. I'm a Cloud Foundry architect. I work in Dino's team, which is basically customer success. So we do anything and everything for a customer. And a few of us are infrastructure people. We come from different places. I spent 10 years at VMware, but I happen to be the only field specialist for OpenStack at VMware for the last 2 years. So I have this weird hybrid world of VMware on one side and OpenStack on the other, and a bunch of background in network and security. So I circle around that side of the world and try to add value wherever I can.
And you've also been working with, just to foreshadow maybe a little chat, Mirantis a little bit on their Cloud Foundry plus Mirantis solution, which was announced this week. Which maybe we'll chat a little bit about that and a lot of your other OpenStack work you're doing.
Sure.
Steve, do you want to introduce yourself from a dark room?
Yeah, right. It's late on the East Coast, so so my name's Steve Kutcher, and I work for Pivotal and work with GE. So there's a team of us who work with GE, and I'm part of that team.
Yeah.
All right. How about that Cloud Foundry Summit?
Well, I was really excited about Summit because I looked at the agenda, and if you haven't seen the agenda, it's pretty amazing. So just the Pivotal CF, Pivotal Cloud Foundry customers that will be there giving talks. I'm showing Allstate, which is fantastic. We got Andy Zitney, who's the big-time SVP, transformative leader of Allstate, who's taking them from being a very traditional architecture to agile development and platform for software. We have GE giving a big talk. Steve, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about who from GE will be coming and what they're presenting. One of my favorite Pivotal Cloud Foundry customers we're doing a lot of work with is Comcast. They're very innovative. I'm really excited they're going to be there. They're giving a talk. CoreLogic is a return speaker. We've had a lot of success there over the last year at Pivotal Cloud Foundry. Verizon, a company that needs no introduction. Their IT team will be there speaking. Garmin, which is a really cool story that Josh was involved in, not to give away what they're speaking about, but we help them scale very rapidly. They're looking to the Cloud Foundry architecture for scaling. Humana, which is a traditional company out of Louisville, Kentucky, Pivotal CF customer, talking about digital transformation. Kroger, not too far away, $100 billion retailer in Cincinnati. And the awesome thing about Kroger is they'll say things like, we're picking our vendors right now based on our ability to go from to 2x our current revenue. Can you scale like that? Lockheed Martin, another Pivotal Cloud Foundry customer. Unbelievable story about how engaging with our platform and with Pivotal Labs really was one of the coolest things they think they've ever done, changed the way they do software. So I think there was a period about 1.5 years ago where people said, hey, this platform thing sounds technically cool, but would enterprise customers ever want to do it? And I think anyone who comes to Summit and sees those 10 names talking about their investments and what they're getting out of it, I think that doesn't leave much to the imagination. So I'm frankly really looking forward to just being in the cheap seats in the peanut gallery, just listening to all the really great architects in those companies and the ideas they've had for some of the software we've all been working on.
Plus, we get some sci-fi too.
Yeah.
The author of The Martian, and there's some color that the Cloud Foundry Foundation and Sam worked to some of his connections to get some of these interesting guys to talk about the futurists.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we can get that guy from AOL with the cool hair.
The Digital Prophet?
Yeah, I think we should just have him roam the halls.
I wonder what his day rate is.
I have no idea. But I'm just really excited about that lineup. I'm going to try to write a blog this week. It's special also because those customers are all, they all had to do work to get their brands and their name and the permission to speak. One of the challenges of our customer base is they've got a lot of lawyers traditionally that doesn't make it easy to just show up and start talking about what they're up to. But I think it's a great beginning of an amazing enterprise community, and I hope a lot of them all go away with new friends of users versus just us. And so I'm really looking forward to that. I hope everyone on this Hangout's going to be there. If not, let us know how we can help you get there.
Absolutely.
And games night. You forgot games night.
That's why I had you here, Matt. Is that the second night?
I think Sam's trying to have it line up with the larger reception, like the big proper reception.
We can play Werewolf.
What's that game?
I'll teach you.
Des says it's a long walk for him. I was like, we can get you a plane ticket, Des. You really want to come?
We'll figure it out.
I'd love to come if you're serious.
I am dead serious. We're happy to get you a plane ticket to come and hang out with us. That'd be fun.
There's a bunch of other fun
Fantastic.
things. I'm really looking forward to this Are Build Packs Dead panel debate or discussion, if you will.
Yeah, there's.
Wait, I missed that one. What's the overview on that one?
Oh, just there's people discussing if you can deploy Docker images into Cloud Foundry, then why would you use build packs, or vice versa? What are the trade-offs of the two approaches? And I have opinions, so it should be fun.
Yeah, some of our most loyal users, like when we came out with Lattice, which is an experimental product that we're going to be saying more about, later this month, just for people to kind of play with right now. They were like, oh, hey, there's no build packs here. I think eventually we will bring build packs to Lattice, but it was the cutting edge of what was available, so they weren't there yet.
I don't think build packs should be in Lattice. I think that build packs there should be a separate service that's its own project that makes Docker images.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is I love James Baer's opinion on this. I think build packs are always the first-class way to get code into Cloud Foundry, and we will continue to do that. But we want to, if people want to make use of our infrastructure, and they have some other build pipelines that work in different ways, I think we could try to accommodate those. Is how I look at it.
Yeah, I think we support both, and the Heroku build packs, they definitely were pretty extensible win for Heroku, and then when you've seen a lot of other platforms adopt them. And the other thing I would say about that is, there's other people experimenting with that idea that Andrew was just talking about, like Jeff Lindsay. I saw over the weekend was tweeting about this thing he called Heroku-ish, which is like a thing that a little bit like CloudRocker, which basically tries to make a component system so that you could take your code, take a build pack, and spit out a Docker image and use that in other tools like he mentioned, like Flynn and Dice and Doku as examples of platforms that might be able to use that. So I definitely want to check out that kind of thing. But we've definitely been talking about that, about how to make the build packs relevant. Because if you don't have let's face it, if you're building a Docker image, you're doing a lot of the work. At some point, you're going to have to take your code and you're going to have to marry it up with a runtime image, and then this all has to happen. It's just a matter of where in the process it happens.
My argument is it's very similar to the arguments people make about static and dynamic typing, and that your choice is either to do a bunch of stuff however you want in the beginning, not think too hard about it, or think a little bit in the beginning and never have to think about it again. Where if you're running a bunch of different, let's say you had Docker, but you are very clean and you only have one base image, then that looks a lot like build packs, and you probably have kind of the little bit of flexibility, a little bit of the operational responsibility and operational functionality that you get from build packs. But if you start to have a bunch of different base images that you're building these runtimes on top of, I think it ends up being a real nightmare, 6 months down the line when you're trying to troubleshoot stuff. Anyway, that'll be fun. I don't want to spoil the whole thing, so.
Did I see Don hop on? He's mysterious right now because he's in an in-between position. He left RedMonk. He hasn't said where he's landing next, so he's sort of like covert ops right now, hopping on.
He's not going to tell us for a week, he said, or at least that's what he told me.
That's cool with me. I'm just curious what he's up to in his downtime. Is he like drinking beer? Is he writing software?
He's on mute, so I don't know what he's doing over there in Minnesota.
Hey Andrew, will the word unikernel show up when you talk about build packs?
I mean, I think that's maybe a little premature. I mean, that's another thing, obviously, I get a little bit excited about, because I think most of what people are interested in and the benefits that they articulate around Docker, you actually get those and then some when you move to unikernels. The thing that's lacking there is the tooling in the community, but from the perspective of performance and density and all these other things people get excited about with containers, that's a much cleaner model without the overhead of the full multi-user operating system.
So
I just like OSV.
So OpenStack continues to be a huge conversation for us too. And Ramiro had done a lot of OpenStack engineering at VMware for a bit, and now he's been thrust into the belly of the beast and all of our most demanding customers. I think Ramiro, you're working, if I don't recall, a very large top 3 in the world bank.
That's right. Right.
Cloud Foundry and OpenStack build out. You're working on that there. Our partner GE, you're working with them on some OpenStack stuff. Do you want to tell a little bit about your day job and what you're seeing out there on OpenStack land plus Cloud Foundry?
Yeah, it's actually very interesting, especially coming from the infrastructure world. See, it's still very different, right? I mean, the platform and the infrastructure, they really need each other, they complement each other, but they are very different. And the type of people that you talk to and you work with, they come from very different sides of the world, very different views of the world. So I try to explain most of the people that I work with on the OpenStack side of things, like, think about Cloud Foundry more like, think like an application. They like to see it as an application. It's a massive application, 40-something VMs, 200-something VMs, whatever it is. But it's an application from your point of view. Just let me do it right. Just I'll tell you what I need for this application to do right, and then we control things from there. We deal with our own, users. Call it an SAP or an Oracle. We are ourselves our own little world, our own little universe. Except that the users are really developers. The way they are using the software they're developing inside and the applications they actually push out to the cloud. They don't have to understand how we do the rest of those things. So bridging that gap is pretty critical, and it's not as easy as it seems. In a sense, I think it should have been a little bit more straightforward for some people just to get a sense of what platform does and what infrastructure does. But it's actually not that easy to make that gap. So I try to help them understand where that gap is first, right? So once you move from there, you need to deal with what they have. We've been lucky that in many cases we just go into customers that say, hey, we want to do Cloud Foundry on OpenStack, and we just are lucky enough that they're putting it together right there in front of us. So it's clean, there's no overhead from previous uses or things like that. There's a few other ones, and that are not the case. There's a few other ones are actually production clouds that you don't know how they were built, or they were built probably pre-Havana timeframe, back in the early OpenStack timeframe. And you have no idea how they're properly deployed. So we have to run a series of tests and making sure this thing is not going to die on us, right? Because we push it pretty hard. I mean, we're consumers of the IIS. So the way we're very demanding. Yeah. At some point, Bosch can actually say, hey, I'm going to just create 30 volumes in one shot. So the IIS may think it's a denial of service attack. So it's like it's going to rate limit me, right, in that sense. So I gotta figure out all those things ahead of time before just going there and having a lot of conversations, a lot of testing, and making sure the environment is stable. I think that's the number one thing. There's a lot of OpenStack implementations out there that are just not that stable. They're still fragile to a certain degree. If you push it too hard, it breaks. So for us, I would say for us to be successful with Cloud Foundry and OpenStack, I think the number one issue is to make sure OpenStack is done right. It's done from the very beginning, from ground up, done properly. And it's not, unfortunately, not very common since a lot of people are still learning about OpenStack. I mean, you go to the IT departments of the large banks and all these guys, the telcos, right? They are learning as well in the process, right? OpenStack is a 5-year-old project. I mean, it's not that old. Most people started kicking the tires with it like no more than two years ago, right?
Yeah.
So I have some history working with this project, and I'd love to sit and have you explain what you mean to do it properly.
You see the
What-
look on Donnie's face when you understatedly saying, "I have some small history." I
I wrote some love.
like
I wrote some,
like
I
You're-
wrote some love letters. I wrote some love letters to OpenStack. But at the end of the day, doing it properly, in my experience and opinion, actually starts at that infrastructure level, at the selection of the hardware even.
Yeah.
And I think people got misled thinking that the software is going to solve all this, but you have to be very thoughtful about how you start, even laying out the storage and the networking from the very beginning.
Right, absolutely agree. And actually, there's some very tricky things because OpenStack gives you this beautiful northbound API that abstracts the infrastructure for you, and that's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing for consumers like us because there are many things that we don't see when we look downstream, and we need to see them, and they may not have been implemented as I was saying the right way. And let me give you an example. Right, one of the first things that I saw when I joined Pivotal was we were kicking out Mirantis install at our Toolsmith team. And the deletion process of every volume took like 10 minutes or 15 minutes for a 30 gig volume. And that was causing Bosch to time out. So what was going on, really? If you go under the hood, you see the instructions you're sending, the commands you're sending to OpenStack are pretty standard, saying go out, delete the volume. No big deal.
Yep.
But underneath, this was implemented using LVM. It was not implemented using Ceph or any other high-end storage array in the backend. It was just using traditional LVM, and LVM was doing literally a DD from dev 0 to every piece of the block of that when it was deleting. So it was taking forever. So things like that affect the way we can deploy, right? And they're not as straightforward because OpenStack obfuscates what really goes on underneath.
Well, I think this brings up another of the interesting things you run into is that when you're dealing with OpenStack, particularly where they've tried to accommodate all these different hypervisors, networking models, and storage options, that you don't actually know what's happening through the APIs and each of those could have idiosyncratic behaviors, as you're kind of starting to talk about.
Right. Right. And actually, in the perfect world, we shouldn't really care so much about those things, but we deal with stem cells, right? So,
we don't live in the perfect world, Ramiro.
Tell me about it. But actually, the interesting thing about the stem cell is because the nature of the way we deploy them, we do need to understand the hypervisor that you have underneath, right? So the guy that really knows all this stuff, the guy that taught me everything I know is really Ferdy, right? He's the guy that really is the master in chief here that really wrote most of this stuff as well. So one of the things that Ferdy was explaining to me is like when you have a Xen hypervisor and when you have a KVM hypervisor, for example, the names of the devices when they come up for attaching a disk is different, right? Instead of VDB1 is now XVDB1, for example. So our scripts need to understand that. Our Monit scripts need to understand that. And that's not very simple. So you do need to have some tweaking depending on the hypervisor. We cannot be completely agnostic of the underlying environment. We need to know some things at least.
Yeah, and right now we do CI on 2 different OpenStacks that I'm aware of. I think the primary is Mirantis, and our failover CI is Blue Box OpenStack. That was what I heard James Bear when I was headed out talking to the Bosch team last week. That was what I heard was what we were using.
Yeah, we have a mix. We actually even had one environment from Nebula. So that was we had to react to that, and we're looking to do stuff with other distros too, like Red Hat, but that's more of a future than current.
Interestingly, this very large bank that I'm working with right now has Red Hat implemented. It's an Icehouse implementation of Red Hat, and there are 2 environments. The first environment actually worked out of the box. It was very easy to set up. We used VXLAN there. In the second environment, they're having a ton of issues with the networking, and hopefully they're going to fix it by tomorrow. But in general, I was very surprised to see that with Red Hat, we didn't really have a big issue setting it up. And since we have the new raw stem cells, we don't care either if you have Ceph as a backend for Cinder. It works actually pretty well. So the only thing that I haven't tried yet, and I would love to kick the tires with that, is really do integration using object storage for MicroBosch as well as Cloud Foundry using the OpenStack object storage. That's the part I would like to play with next.
Andrew, that's your cue.
I was joined by a 3-year-old, so I'm trying to get him to go.
So what's
someone else has to take cue.
What's the largest you've seen, Ramiro? I mean, I see when I talk to OpenStack folks about this, they say, hey, the thing is pretty stable, 50, 100 nodes, like that's become stable. Above that gets a little bit more exotic. What's the biggest that we're installing in terms of number of nodes out there in the field that you run into?
Well, the largest one I've seen, I didn't have to use Cloud Foundry. It was I was at VMware at the time. Yeah. The largest one I've seen is 1,100 nodes out in the UK, and they were saying, at least the customer was pretty happy with the performance and the results they were having. They claimed they didn't have any major issues, but it's a very engineering-centric company. So when you have tons of engineers that really can tweak any little thing and each one of them take care of each part, it's much easier, right? It gets complicated when you're trying to when it's a regular IT type company that doesn't necessarily have expertise. They're trying to buy a package that is shrink wrapped and they can just install it and it just works. It's not like that right now. That's what
I think that's the important point here, is that when you see people having success with OpenStack, it's almost always, or at least I think it's always an engineering-centric culture that's taken on the burden of managing, maintaining, and tweaking all those things themselves.
Right.
I suspect, though, that while Nebula and cloud scaling may have been a bit early in their attempts to build a deployable by anybody kind of OpenStack environment, I suspect that within, call it 12 to 18 months, you will have very successful turnkey deployments that you can buy from an HP or EMC or whatever.
How much would you like to make a bet?
What are the terms of the bet, Andrew?
I bet sushi dinners.
Okay. But what are the parameters?
We can work it out offline.
Okay, fair enough.
No, I think from our perspective, OpenStack is an awesome thing in terms of people building a net new open cloud stack. I think that to us has always been appealing, and it's just a matter of, as you said, Ramiro, making sure that the API that they're standing up can undertake the DDoS that we feel like, right? For these new installations, it's probably the most demanding API usage they've ever had when Cloud Foundry shows up and said, this is the state of the world I want, go.
Right, exactly. Especially Bosch, because Bosch doesn't care. It just pushes hard. And it's up to the IIS to react properly and not just crash and burn.
Yeah, Bosch is like, give me 50 VMs.
Yeah, in parallel.
That's right. That's right.
I'm curious, Donnie, what was your experience in talking with clients? Like, have you seen large OpenStack installations? Like, is it more like what Ramiro said, where there's like this outlier of a 1,100 VM or server installation, or is that have you found a couple of instances of that?
No, I mean, I think we talk to a lot of developers and ops folks, right? The direct practitioners, and the vast majority of those folks are still mostly playing around, right? If you look at the OpenStack survey and you think about the kinds of deployments they see, most of them are still in the early test. Not that many of them made it through to production, and what we see is reflected in that, and even more so, right? And then we see all the hobbyist stuff going on too, right? People are still just playing around with stuff on their laptops, and that's one of the reasons I like some of the things that y'all have done recently with containers, right? And saying like, hey, let's do Cloud Foundry on my laptop. I think that's a huge differentiator, right?
Yeah, that was the Lattice stuff. I don't know what you thought of that, Donnie. We're not going to formally message that for about another month. Schaefer, Bear, Unsi, and I put that out as kind of a experimental website.
Oh, there's a formal thing? Because I kind of thought it was already out there. I mean, I guess I must be watching a different crowd of people.
It's out there. It's out there. It already has 300 or so GitHub stars, right? Like it popped like in one weekend that it came out. But we didn't blog it. We didn't give any. We just put docs in a website and tweeted it, once or twice. Or I got excited, tweeted it a few times.
I saw enough folks talking about that. I was like, all right, it's a thing, right? I mean, I don't care what the press release looks like. There's got to be somebody who cares about the press releases, but that's not what I track.
No, Donnie, you're exactly right. Our strategy was a no announcement launch and just see if developers pick it up and start using it, and that's exactly what happened. So it was an anti-launch. But the only thing that happened was a couple people were like, "Why did you do that? It doesn't have build packs. What's the future of it?" So the people that were really CF, fans were curious what we were up to with it because it was different.
Because there was a lack of messaging, it left a lot of the speculation. Where if we come out and kind of message it with press or other things, and maybe some of that been cleared up. It's complicated, Donnie.
That's a good thing though, right? Because if you put a building block out there, you can see what people build with it and then message based on that versus trying to decide in advance what it's meant for.
No argument from me.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we did. We put it out there, and what people saw was there's something happening in the container management systems. I mean, I think, the market is looking for consolidation way before it's going to happen. So number one is everyone's trying to pick a winner there. And I think that, my tweet on that was that containers are a feature of the Linux kernel, okay? Let's be honest. These are a Linux kernel feature. Lots of people are going to use them. The grep market never consolidated, the right way of doing grep. Lots of people do it in different ways. The pipe market didn't, and the bash market didn't. So this is a Linux feature, and lots of people are going to use it in different ways. And then the only thing about Lattice that I think is really interesting is we toned down the focus on custom networking, and we said, hey, when these app nodes come up with a Docker image, they're just going to join a load balancer very rapidly and automatically, and that's why people saw cluster up to productivity was super fast with Lattice. Because if you're a developer writing a microservice, it's not really necessary to do a lot of complicated networking sometimes. That was what people saw as a differentiator for Lattice. And we're going to lean into it. We've got the whole Spring Cloud, Spring Boot team putting mileage on it right now. And we're just going to make it part of our normal getting started with Spring microservices guides for developers. So I'm pretty excited about that. Anyway, love your feedback on that, Donnie, but that's where we see the need in the market that no one's taking care of those folks.
Yeah, no, it's totally funny because like you're talking about messaging. It's like the first thing I heard about Lattice, I was like, oh, hey, there's a .cf domain. That's interesting. And it's the Central African Republic of all things, like the most war-torn country in the world. But on the bright side, unlike what is it, .io, right, which is one of those Indian island countries, the money actually seems like it goes back to the country.
Hey, let's not forget the .ly domains.
Paul Moritz personally asked me if it was classy or it was okay to use the .cf given the Central African war-tornness of it. But it was more of a vanity domain for us. There was a subtle hint that Lattice was based on Cloud Foundry, so hopefully no harm, no foul there.
Oh yeah, and it's totally a scalable domain too, right? You can do everything .cf as you sort of form these things up piecemeal, which I hope you continue to do.
That's my plan.
Yeah, I think we were first to market with a full-fledged container platform, and now we're trying to make it useful to developers if they're solving smaller problems, so that we can build a big ecosystem. I think that's our straightforward plan.
Well, I think one of the things that hampered adoption is the Cloud Foundry is an all-or-nothing proposition, and there's a lot of things that Cloud Foundry does that would be useful in isolation, which I think we saw with the Lattice experiment so far.
Yeah, and it turned out that we were unbelievable runaway adoption in the Fortune 1000, where people needed a whole platform, and less so in micro startups that had like 2 or 3 people working on a problem. So I think, if you look on the followers on Lattice on GitHub now, you'll see people in a lot of web startups. And so I think we've done something meaningful for that part of the market now too. So I'm pretty excited about it. And we're only going to do more, bringing all of the Netflix microservices stuff to Lattice as a getting started experience. So hopefully that'll help people that today would have a hard time getting started on that kind of thing.
Not to belabor this point, but if you're three people in a dorm room in Palo Alto, you probably don't need a bunch of role-based access control for all your services.
Yeah. So Ramiro, you're also, on OpenStack, you're also helping Mirantis architect a reference architecture for Cloud Foundry. You want to close off on a little bit of any considerations that you're sharing with them as you're saying, hey, what would that look like, or what that dialogue's like with Mirantis? I thought it was pretty cool. About a year ago, they wrote a blog that said the world has a need for 0 Cloud Foundries. OpenStack will solve all of the problems. That was written by Alex Friedland, who's now a friend of mine, and we both kind of laugh about that one. That's how we met each other. And now they're saying actually all of our customers are asking us for Cloud Foundry. So what's that dialogue been like technically with them?
It's actually been great. I expected a little bit tension there, but on the contrary, it's been super easy. They are eager to learn. I spent quite a bit of time with one of their lead engineers in New York, and we've been working remotely. It's pretty difficult sometimes with the time zone and all the other things that we have to do in the day job. But it's been very rewarding in the sense of seeing every step, every new deployment that they do, every time that they learn something new, it's like, wow, this thing is amazing. And how Bosch is like, wow, this thing, now I get it. Now I understand how this thing works. It's fantastic, right? So it's a classic reaction the first time that when you come to this world and you don't understand it, and you start seeing what it can do. I'm seeing exactly that type of reaction. And then I'm talking now to product management there to see what do they want to do in terms of the interaction with a product called Murano. Murano is a new, it's a service catalog as a service model that OpenStack now is part of the incubation project, and Mirantis is one of the primary sponsors of that. And they're doing a pretty nice job on that. So there's so much potential there, right? Like similar to what Brooklyn can do, right? You can create applications that are in a catalog, in an OpenStack catalog using Murano, and deploy them using Murano and expose them as services for Cloud Foundry. Or potentially use Murano to deploy a whole PCF environment, a whole foundation in one shot. And that way we solve all the installation issues very quickly. They can pre-provision things for us. So the potential there is huge. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, obviously.
But Murano's just a front end on Heat, right? Like the work we actually...
Yes, it is. So, I mean, the idea, we're not advocating by any means to use Heat to deploy Cloud Foundry, because it wouldn't make any sense. I mean, you lose the advantage of having Bosch. But I would say, why don't use this Heat in order to deploy Bosch and deploy Cloud Foundry from that point on?
Yeah, it's actually like with 1.4 that came out. We came out with PCF 1.4, and Bosch does only infrastructure independent operations, which means that it doesn't do some of the things that it takes to prepare an environment to install it. So James Bear, maybe you can talk a little bit about, we wrote a trial CloudFormation script on our Amazon install that prepares the Amazon environment, like, hey, I need to set up an S3 bucket, some of the other minutia that's involved, as opposed to just automating, directly the resources.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Amazon environment in particular, you're much more likely to have someone like open a sub account that's just like clean and doesn't have anything there. You just show up and it's like, okay, there's nothing here. And how do you go from that to full blown, in this case Cloud Foundry, but probably in a lot of places other things too. Like you want to start using best practices for whatever cloud you're on. And in the Amazon case, that's going to be creating a VPC, creating an IAM user with only the roles that they should have access to. So we're explicitly naming the S3 buckets that they should be able to do, and which operations are those S3 buckets. And then you start, if you want to use some of the other things in Amazon like RDS and ELBs, you've got to set those things up. And a lot of people, if they're just getting started, that can be a little overwhelming. So we've got really step-by-step instructions with pictures and click here, then do this. We have that kind of manual step-by-step thing. But unlike, I think, when you show up in a vCenter environment, you're much more likely to find someone that's very conversant and knows exactly how they want you to use their vSphere environment. And Amazon, it's a little bit more likely that they're going to want some help. So we're gonna pursue finding the best way to do that. Some people have mentioned, why don't you use something like Terraform, because then it's a little bit more applicable to other clouds too. But we're at least right now we're playing with this CloudFormation script, and we're gonna see how far that takes us.
Yeah, like we focus really on the app portability, not necessarily the system setup portability, like the basic system setup. We don't do that for every cloud. More if we can bring our platform and all the services that it runs once it's ready to interact with Bosch.
And that's sort of why we don't have it supported as a product with the auto installer on every single cloud right now.
Yeah.
Which is a good.
But at least regarding Murano, I mean, if they can somehow, help, pre-provision the environment, leave it ready for the foundation to be installed, it will simplify everybody's life in an OpenStack deployment. it would help a lot.
Yeah, I actually think it was a big deal when Mirantis came to the table and they said, look, just practically speaking, a lot of our customers are all asking for this. And it was kind of good to see the market get practical. I think sometimes you see markets get really navel-gazy on individual techs, and in this case, it's like, hey, this is the stack that the world increasingly wants. And I don't think there's an OpenStack player that matters left that doesn't carry a Cloud Foundry flag now. So I think that's pretty cool to see.
So Ramiro, why do you think that would be, or what are the advantages of that approach versus just having one image that kind of bootstraps everything from, the same way we're doing it on vSphere or Amazon right now? Why would going to this pre-provisioning with Murano thing help us?
Because you still need to do some manual things, right? You need to create a tenant in the OpenStack world. You need to create a set of keys. You need to download the proper keys, download the variables, make sure they're properly.
Okay. So then you'd use those to parameterize the. Yeah. Okay. So then I see. It's a helper.
The other thing that also is important, in many cases, I would say in most installations, I've had to create custom flavors, right? Flavors that come by default are not good enough, so you have to make them from scratch. Right. So if you
Swisscom's team that worked with Cloud Foundry and Bosch, they came to us last year and they said, hey, we want you to manage flavor management within OpenStack, because right now we only want to go through Bosch. Like, they had a very aggressive vision of what they want to do with Cloud Foundry, and we do need to decide as a community what we're going to do, because we leave some of that initial bootstrapping and setup configuration to the users today.
Yeah, the flavor is a big deal. I mean, in many cases, if you don't have the right access, you just can't do it. Or you have to, deal with what's in there. So somebody has to have an intelligent mechanism behind scenes that will actually tell me, if I don't have the access, are these flavors good enough? If not, which ones should I pick for my instance, right? That sort of thing. If all that can be pre-provisioned, OpenStack is not that clean. I mean, if you look at the Horizon interface, for example, there are some fields when you're defining the flavors that are written in megabytes, some other ones in gigabytes. Some of them, it doesn't make any sense. It's very prone to error, when you're doing that kind of thing. So in general, it's a good thing if some non-human mechanism can pre-provision some things for you ahead of time.
You sort of alluded to this earlier, but is there some way to do like a smoke test or burn-in where you say, run a bunch of stuff against this infrastructure and then do this, this, and this, and tell me if you think Bosch will work?
Yeah, that's actually, since I joined, actually, that's one of the things that I've been trying to advocate for, is to have some sort of a tool. There is a lot of open source material out there, a series of tests called Tempest that are for OpenStack specifically, that are designed to test the system hard. So we could actually use some framework based on Tempest. There's a few good ones out there, like Rally, for example, is pretty good. That allows to create this JavaScript, JSON objects, feed them into Rally, and just run it against the environment. Actually, I was playing with that today. I was just kind of hit it too hard against one of my environments. It almost blew, but that's the fun of it, right? Too. You want to see how it will react.
So the other thing I'd like to see, and I think we might have touched on this a little bit at the sales kickoff, is this idea that, and this wouldn't just be for OpenStack, but across all infrastructures, I'd like to gather metrics at that Bosch layer about how things fail, how they perform, and I'd really encourage people to publish them. I think we would do, maybe not even just us, but someone should expose to the whole industry what the actual operational overhead of running some of these different infrastructures really is.
Totally agree.
Yeah, give some examples of those statistics that you're most interested in.
How long does it take for a VM to come online? What are the percentage of stillborn? Just all the different ways that things can fail that Bosch has to remediate. Just annotate those and just drop them in the. I mean, I think it's just a matter of taking what is already happening and wrapping it up in a way that it's quote unquote data.
I mean, in the perfect world, again, we know the world's not perfect, but in the perfect world, I would love to see a tool that you can say, Mr. Customer, run it against your cloud and see if it comes back green, yellow, or red. Right? If it's green, then we know we can go in, deploy it. It's gonna work fine. Right? If it's yellow, these are the things you need to fix, sort of thing, in order for us to deploy properly.
So we had some new people join us, Midwesterners.
Oh, hey.
Bridget's returning to After Dark.
Is
It's
my
been a few
mic
days.
working?
I can hear you.
Okay. For some reason, I don't know why, in Safari, it likes to tell me sometimes your microphone is hardware muted, which is never true.
That's just a bug with Google. It does that on everyone, I think.
It doesn't usually say that to me in Chrome, but I'm like signed into my work account in Chrome, and you know how it is when like it likes to sign you out of Google Hangouts if you go look at your mail that was signed into another account. Ugh.
Auth is hard. It's especially hard for Google for some
I seem
reason.
to have a lot of trouble with it. But yeah, I thought I would pop in and see what you folks are talking about.
We had Ducey when I first said that. Ducey was here, and then he jumped out, so I don't know. Maybe he'll come back.
I think he was on a plane.
Is that what it was?
I think he said he was going to Seattle tonight.
So what are you up for? Or what are you thinking?
I just figured I'd listen. Somebody on Twitter was saying you were talking about OpenStack, and I was like, I don't know shit about OpenStack, so I'll sit and listen.
Well, the good news for you, Bridget, is that Ramiro, who's here, is both humble and knows way more about OpenStack than almost anyone you'll ever meet. So
Awesome.
It's a 1-2 punch.
Biggest exaggeration I've heard all night, but
See, he doesn't even want to take the compliment.
And I saw you talking about Terraform, and I was like, between Terraform and like we were trying to figure out how to replicate everything in our AWS EC2 Classic infrastructure and stand it up in VPC, but like everything exactly as it was. And it turned out to be a giant pain because both Terraform and like Chef provisioning, both at least a couple weeks ago when we looked at the GitHub repos, had horrible bugs that were like, and if this happens, your whole infrastructure will explode. And so we ended up going with like just capturing the AWS JSON basically, and then using the AWS like JSON skeleton stuff to stand the stuff back up, which is kind of kludgy, but.
Have you had problems with Terraform, or what was the?
No, I haven't tried it because I like read through the GitHub issues, and there was some stuff in there that sounded really dire, like not ready for prime time dire.
This is why we have this crazy opinionated way of doing that called Boss that some people are like, what?
So tell me what Andrew sent me a link to Bosch that I haven't even had a chance to try yet. What's it like?
Ramiro, why don't you tell her what Bosch would do for her if she wanted to copy her environments from one AZ and Amazon to the other, what it would look like?
Yeah, what does that do?
Well, if you want to copy from one AZ to another, you just basically change the deployment manifest that you have. You literally add a new area for each one of the new VMs that are going to be in the secondary zone, and you just literally run one command that is called Bosch deploy, and it will just do it for you. You don't even have to think twice. It will do canary-based deployments, so it will test the waters before it keeps going. And if it works, it will just completely continue. If it fails, it's not going to kill your environment. It's going to tell you where it failed. That's the other thing that matters too, because of the canary deployment.
Exactly. Yeah, that sounds worth checking out for sure. And I see that people are putting some cool links in the Hangout.
Yeah, Bosch is essentially an opinionated configuration. It's actually really a package manager, a configuration manager, and an orchestrator mashed into one tool.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does in an opinionated way, it's really a package manager for distributed systems. There's three main primitives. So the bottom is a stem cell, which is a machine image that has the Bosch agent that will wake up on boot and phone home and get its instructions.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next is the notion of a Bosch release. And a Bosch release is essentially a package that defines some bits that will be on the disk. It defines a bit of the like different types of processes that should be run, and then it has some templates like ERB, the same kind of stuff that everyone uses to write files. And then releases are you take releases and you compose them into deployments. So the highest level primitive is a deployment, and the deployment is defined by a bunch of these raw infrastructure bits like numbers of VMs, and then how things should kind of be connected to each other. And then once you have defined the deployment with your releases and your stem cells, well, I guess your stem cells specify your releases specify your stem cells. You push Bosch deploy, the whole thing just gets imposed at once on the infrastructure as a service. And I don't know, you might not have heard this earlier, but we were talking about how Bosch will basically, it will really tax some of the infrastructure as a service, particularly like some fragile, brittle OpenStack deployments. It'll just knock them over. saying, provision this many VMs and this many disks really fast, and they just can't deal with it, or it'll time out before it takes 15-20 minutes for it to get done. So Bosch will go on with his life.
That's okay. I don't have any OpenStack right now, so I'm not worried about that.
But it works pretty good. Go ahead.
Bosch is it's really Google Borg inspired, and at Google scale, usability is not as important as byte for byte replication and the ability to actually say we know exactly what we want and go make it so, and to do that in any data center on demand. And so we've been willing to be misunderstood by the market because we felt that there was a very important demanding part of the market that they would like that. And we don't make people feel as good in the first 30 minutes that they try the tool that they're really smart. And we're working to make the getting started experience better, but if you want what you asked for, which was a byte for byte exact redeployment of a cluster, it's one of the best ways to go.
And it's what we use to manage Pivotal Web Services. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, I said cool. That's good to know.
We should introduce her to Tony. He runs operations for our hosted cloud, and he lives by it.
I don't know. Go ahead, Donnie.
Yeah, one thing I was really curious about that Ramiro touched on and you did too is, how does it behave in the case of failures? Like, how does that work? If a VM fails to launch in time, if an AZ is down when you're trying to move to it, what happens? What does it do?
Well, actually, I've had a lot of experience doing that this week, particularly with Bosch on OpenStack. And since the IIS that I was working on wasn't capable of handling these issues, Bosch would time out at different stages. But when it times out, it doesn't mean it's done there. It will actually clean up after himself in most cases, right? Depending on the type of error that you got. So it will start deleting things in the background, deleting all those extra VMs that it created for, since they're not going to be deployed VMs anymore, it's just going to delete them. And it has some really good logs. I mean, they're sometimes too detailed, but definitely good information, and you know what's really going on. So what I like particularly is the fact that it doesn't leave leftovers on purpose. So you can actually clean up nicely after yourself. If a deployment didn't completely succeed, and even if you didn't manage to delete everything on its own, you can say one command and say just Bosch delete deployment CF, for example. It will just delete it all in the right sequence, in the right order. It will get even rid of the stem cells that were uploaded at the beginning. It's very clean in the way that it manages things at the end to achieve that end state. That's one thing I particularly like about Bosch, the way it handles things.
So if you're familiar with configuration management in theory and practice, and the way that these, kind of the dominant resource cycle where you have a declared state and an existing state, and the tool tries to reconcile them, Bosch does that at the level of the deployment. So as it can, if it detects that you're missing a VM in a deployment, then it will attempt to remediate. It will attempt to resynchronize the existing state with the declared state and add that VM back to the cluster with the proper configuration, which is also how you do the new deployment. So like the difference between repairing the cluster and kind of doing a full new deploy is a very similar cycle. Bosch just detects the difference between the existing state and the declared state.
So Des, you've been talking a little bit in the side channel here. Have you used Bosch? Thinking of using it? What are your thoughts on it?
To be honest, I haven't yet. In fact, the closest I've come to at the moment is creating the wiki page for it. But it's on the list of things to put in my lab, and it's for all the reasons that you've just been talking about. Australia's market's very, very early, and on the whole, from an IT and business perspective, we're about 3% of the globe compared to what you're looking at. And the biggest challenge we have is what you were talking about earlier, where we don't have any idea what the infrastructure we're going into is like. We don't know what its performance is. We don't know how it's being configured. We don't know what sort of workloads it's currently running and what it should be running. And so we have to go in there with this idea that we've got to be able to build and stand up infrastructure or paths very quickly and get back to the focal point, which is what's the business problem we're trying to solve. And with some of the partners that I'm working with now, like HP, we're actually getting to the point where we'll take something like their little SL2500, which is a 2AU box with 4 micronodes in it, and pre-build OpenStack and tools in it so that we can quite literally put it into someone's rack and start from there with a single app and go through that whole, what I call a zero to hero journey, where we take one business problem, one app, one data set, run it through the entire DevOps process, go through the discovery and the documentation and figure out what it takes to stand that thing up, either on current tin or this lab that we bring in. So Bosch is very much on my list of things to get up to speed with, and with a view that I'm going to try and make it so dummy safe that we can stand it up within minutes. We can automate the deployment as part of an entire, from bare metal upwards implementation, almost to the point where if I have a meeting in the afternoon, I can take some kit and put it in the lab and push a button and then come back 20 minutes later after having a coffee and take it out with me knowing it works. So I'm very keen to see what it can do. And I've got labs both at home and at work and in sort of public clouds that I use for this stuff. But it gets very messy very quickly, so hence the interest in a tool or a platform that can make life easier.
So just full disclosure, I don't know anyone who learned how Bosch works and started using it that doesn't love it. At the same time, it has a very steep learning curve. It almost looks like a brick wall. And as one of our field engineers is fond of saying, it's a bag of knives.
Well, I mean, let's be clear. We're making investments to
That's a very flat forehead.
Some of the complexity of Bosch is, remember, it was actually written before we knew we were going to share it with anyone. So it was written by Vadim, who's an ex-Google, engineer, so that Vadim could manage our CloudFoundry.com platform that he deployed. And so he wrote it in a way where he constructed these, relatively large manifests, and then, checking if the manifest works or not. That takes a little bit of time before you learn, whether that'll work or not. There's not a fast feedback loop. So James Baer, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the investments we've been thinking about making in the Bosch?
So just really quick, what you're saying is it has all the usability you'd expect from a Google SRE. That's what you're saying.
When I tell the story, people don't understand, why is this awesome tool so intimidating to learn? I'm like, well, it was by Vadim for Vadim.
Yeah.
And Vadim even joked back in the day when I asked him about it, because I didn't think the user experience was that great. He's like, we don't want dumb people running our platform.
It's probably fine. I mean, I don't think anyone who bothers to call into Cloud Foundry after dark is actually afraid of things that are confusing and difficult to set up, right? Raise your hand if you haven't set up it's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, we managed to get a Hangout running, and that's bad enough UX. So.
Right.
So we are doing some things to make we're trying to make it a little bit more of a hill instead of a brick wall, as Andrew says. There's this great product manager named Dimitri, and we'll try and get him on here one of these times. And he hangs out in the IRC room for Bosch a lot for people that are having trouble getting started.
He's a character independent of anything to do with Bosch.
Yes, he is.
Unbelievable guy.
He's fantastic. So you should try learning Bosch if for no other reason than to interface with Dimitri a little bit. You'll be a better person for it. Some of the things we've done recently. And we've actually done this quite a long time ago. We created this thing called Bosch Lite. Bosch Lite is a Vagrant up style experience for starting with all of Bosch on one Vagrant VM, where we treat the VMs that you would be deploying, instead of deploying those into a real public cloud or private cloud with actual VMs. We'll create containers on that Vagrant VM and let you practice bringing up a distributed system on there. So that way you can actually try Bosch with a laptop where you have Vagrant and VirtualBox. The networking is a little bit different when you're doing it that way than when you're doing it on a full scale, but your feedback loops are much faster. So that's one thing we've done. And Dimitri has a whole initiative in play to try and take out a lot of the networking. So one of the things the networking complexity. So Andrew mentioned this thing called a deployment. So today in the deployment, you actually express usually very detailed information about the network. For each VM, you might specify the static IP that it gets. You can use dynamic depending on the IaaS, but trying to take that stuff out of the deployment file such that maybe the cloud operator person who sets it up might say, hey, I'm going to get everything ready and everything else can just basically essentially think like you're using DHCP for the rest of the way, and you don't have to think about it anymore. So Dimitri's going to be simplifying these manifests. So hopefully they go from like let's say 100 files lines in a YAML file down to like 20, and that should make it a lot easier to reason about these like distributed system deployments.
Yep. We're going to come from power down to usability as opposed to the other one, which is sometimes a March products never make. You start super usable and you never quite get to repeatable at high scale. So it's a really tricky balance in architecting this stuff. So Ed, you seem pretty excited about the Vagrant at Bosch. You want to share any thoughts there? I saw you on the chat bar on the side. Oh, we can't chat now. I think everyone's got kid duty. That's the fun part about Cloud Foundry After Dark is it's usually right at the "Are they in bed yet?" hour for a lot of the parents on the show.
Or at the entirely too late hour for those of us who are visiting family on the East Coast right now.
Happens.
I'm keen to get my hands on your Vagrant file. I'm making a lot of noise here in Australia and around Australia, Asia Pac rather, around people building little labs on their laptops. Back to your point about the brick wall and the vertical learning curve. So my approach to tackle that is to hand it out.
Yeah, look for the Bosch Lite on GitHub, or we can dump a link in real quick.
Yeah, okay, I can find that. I'd like to have a couple hundred geeks in Australia playing with this on their laptops, because that's how you get a conversation going if they can actually speak the same language.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, if you want a really fast, rewarding thing, try Lattice. That's the lightweight, just container system. That's going to make you feel smart the fastest. That's how we can get to those folks. And then Bosch is maybe a step from there. It's order of magnitude a bit more complex than that.
Okay, thanks.
It's a bag of knives.
You're good. You should run Cloud Foundry marketing, Andrew.
You're saying Lattice is knives too?
No,
a couple weeks ago you were like, Lattice is cool.
Lattice is cool.
Lattice is beautiful.
Hey, Andrew, you can't keep dropping that quote without naming the individual who calls it a bag of knives.
You want me to tell? I mean, I'm not sure.
It's time for secrets.
It's that Adam Zawicki is who I heard say that.
Okay. Adam's great.
Legendary field engineer for Cloud Foundry.
So I think I should make a bag of knives T-shirt now, though.
I was just say I think it's time.
A bag with a bunch of knives poking out of it.
Exactly.
Then all you guys say is our solution engineers provide the well-padded bag for you.
Yeah.
Sale made, right?
I mean, when people are saying that, they usually have the blood on their hands, right? So.
I think, to be clear, the commercial product does not expose that YAML interface. So it's a very insider's joke about the YAML face directly, using the YAML interface directly.
That's right. We work really hard to make sure that there's like a next finish type of experience for the commercial product that doesn't have that. But
once you taste that power.
You're like, I want to touch the knives directly. Hand me the blade.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is you can't give people like the kid knives forever, right? It's at some point they want to make some sushi themselves.
Or the plastic knives they give you in the airport.
I don't want to spork.
And so, they're going to be looking for that extra power, right? Like the more you expand out, and especially with, some of the more advanced users, right? I mean, they're going to want that YAML. They're not going to be a bunch of Windows admins who are like, oh, hey, and now I've got Cloud Foundry.
It's a real debate, Donnie. We have one of the largest ISVs in the country right now is looking to build out all their new SaaS applications on Cloud Foundry. And there's a debate I'm having of whether or not we give them the click next thing, which is probably where they'll start. And if we eventually they're going to want, at the scale that they want to run this and the hundreds of thousands of containers, if they're going to want to have, the YAML interface too. I don't know what the right answer is. I'd like to make the more visually appealing interface more and more powerful over time versus just abandoning ship there, but it is a decision on what kind of interface you want to come at the product with.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, the thing that we see, or I guess I shouldn't even say that
what we are you
when
talking
I was
about?
at Redmond, that we a lot was
Wait,
you know, you've got to have the same capabilities in the API that you do in the GUI, right? I mean, you can't get away with having like the GUI have secret capabilities that you can't do with the API, with the CLI client, or whatever, right? And so, you know, I think that drives a lot of the decision making from a product point of view in terms of like what can Bosch do versus what can you do with some pretty GUI on top of that. In that you can't have the GUI be privileged, you have to have people be able to automate everything you can do in the GUI version. And you know, in terms of what you push, that's just a marketing story at that point, where people who want the full capability, there's an underlying API that can do that for them.
Well,
so in this case, I think it's the opposite. Where,
to be clear, there is no Bosch API. You configure YAML files.
Look, that's an API from my point of view, right? It's how you interact with things programmatically.
Yeah.
Whether it's a REST API or not, no, who cares?
it's not a network API, but there's definitely an API.
But Bear, do you want to talk a little bit about this? Because you get asked for an API on Bosch a lot, right?
Well, I mean, I think there is an API right now. Like if you were to ask Dimitri if he were here, he would tell you the CLI is the API. Like in the CLI, you pass a reference to a YAML file,
right?
And then so what that looks like under the covers for people that have decomposed this is it's a a RESTful call to a backend server where the YAML is just sent there and then everything happens. So Dimitri is trying to prioritize all the things that people want in Bosch, things like simplify that YAML file so it's easier and things like that. So he's got to figure out, do I make a nice RESTful interface that's exposed to the whole world? As that a product priority versus simplifying the product. Right now he's focused on simplifying the product, so he's saying use the CLI as your API.
Nobody said it was easy.
Yeah, but just to be clear, Donnie, kind of what I'm saying is that in the GUI, we generate those YAML files for the user, right? That's what makes it significantly easier. As opposed to, so it's not like we're taking away power so much as we're doing some of the file generation for them to make it.
In some ways, I would say the GUI is actually less powerful than if you understand how to do those manifests yourself.
Yeah. One thing that is nice about the GUI is that we put these things called verifiers and validators in there. So it's like, YAML by itself won't always catch your data type errors and things like that. Or let's say you mistype the S3 bucket password or for your access credentials, and you don't want to wait for, in some cases, let's say 30 minutes to when that part of the lifecycle happens. You'd like to know, like at that time where you type the credentials in, have the thing validate. So the GUI does these kinds of niceties for people up front, whereas if you're using the YAML, you usually find that out later.
That the YAML prevents you from having to click.
Yes.
That's kind of a win right there.
So we're good 70 minutes into After Dark. Do we have another 5 minutes of secrets in this?
I got another hour in me, man. This is fun.
Are we going to talk about RFPs today?
I'm excited that Ramiro came on with some practical experience. That's really a pleasure to have Ramiro here. He's been.
Thank you. It's fun to be here. I always listen in.
Yeah, you were like, "Hey, I'm going to lurk tonight." I'm like, "No, you're not. You're going to come on."
Well, we're what, about a month away from having the OpenStack be a supported product too, right?
In the GUI.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, as far as I know, the initial version though is going to be single AZ, so we got to set the expectations right on that.
Sure. Well, Bosch works now. It's that user experience that we're working on.
Right.
That's right. It's somewhere around a month or so. We'll have the first version of the really nice GUI on top of the OpenStack install.
I've just seen people working on it and a lot of screenshots and demos of it.
Yeah, it's coming along. It really is. It's going to be really nice. Like we'll have this really nice commercial installer for OpenStack, AWS, and vSphere, vCloud, vCloud Air. All those different environments. You'll be able to get started in a few hours with Cloud Foundry.
So is it time for secrets?
I think it is. Must be secret time.
This one's really off the record. This one doesn't get shared, okay?
There's only 13 people watching this right now.
Good. It was really interesting. We launched this 1.4 product on Amazon, and we messaged it. And I had never really done business with Amazon before, right? Like, we just used them as infrastructure, and suddenly we had a back-channel conversation. And there was some concern that was shared from certain people that, when we launched it, we messaged that our MySQL service had better availability design than RDS, because RDS is master-slave, so anyone knows that that's going to be usually some app downtime unless you've done some other failover within your app to have multiple MySQL databases that it's reading from. And with our MySQL service on Bosch, we said, hey, it's a quorum group of 3 masters that the writes there. And I was just interviewed in this one article. I said, hey, and I was mindful of it because James Barry will tell you we've had on our console, with the RDS failover, we've had 2 or 3 of those in the last couple months, James, maybe 2, 3?
I think actually 4 now.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have 4 times where we've had to continually improve how fast our app can tolerate that failover. And I casually said, it's just that in mind. I was like, hey, we've designed a different platform set of considerations with our database service on Amazon, which is in some ways better than RDS on pure availability. Now, the trade-off, as an intelligent architect would know, is that now you have to have 3 masters. You don't get to use as much horsepower of the capacity you've bought, and it's a different set of trade-offs, right? So it's not really saying what's better or worse. But it was interesting talking to them about that, because that was pretty dramatic with them. They did not like any negative messaging around.
We're not happy about that story.
I don't want to kind of, but yes, there was a big opinion that was not cool to talk about that, and I think it's just interesting to share as a very small slice of a secret, because as a multi-cloud platform provider, on one hand you want to talk up that you support these things. On the other hand, sometimes if you bring a feature to that platform that is better than what they offer, you're in a bit of a pinch. That was an interesting moment for me to try to maneuver between all of these different multi-cloud worlds. And I also thought this week with Mirantis signing up to be official Cloud Foundry members, where they had before said, hey, OpenStack doesn't need any of this Cloud Foundry platform. There's this kind of tension between the infrastructure providers and a very value-add platform layer that abstracts it. So
I would say there's a meta conversation there about what is considered the etiquette for discussing the reality of these technologies, right? Like, are you able to publicly discuss what the trade-offs are with respect to performance and failure characteristics around the choices of these different architectures or deployments, without offending the people that might have either monetary or emotional attachment to some of those things?
Yeah, because I did 16 press interviews, and this came out once because I happened to be thinking about it. Like, I wasn't going after them in any way. It just, hey, I just saw an RDS prod notification come out before. And so I felt a little naive that all of a sudden the heavy politics came back at me. And it reminded me that this is a big money industry we're all playing in when we go to talk about a technology or how we use it. And so anyway, that's my secret for the week, which was a little bit juicy, I thought.
Welcome to enterprise software.
And if this gets replayed at Amazon headquarters,
maybe we can get. Never mind. I won't even say that.
I'll just say that I am looking forward to having a very close technical collaboration partnership with Amazon, and I think we can do great things together to optimize the platform. And they have been very helpful in sharing feedback on our install experience, which they thought could be better, and that's why we want to do the CloudFormation script. And I think they can be a great partner, but it's interesting being a multi-cloud platform and kind of how that makes each individual infrastructure feel.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting about Amazon too is, I mean, I'm sure you've seen the same thing, right? If you look at their partners over time, they have a very strong tendency to go and sort of reproduce about 80% of their features and then ship that themselves.
Yeah, and that's honestly what I said to them. I said, hey, I actually kind of assumed that you didn't partner. And just to be honest, hey, you guys are Amazon. You're kind of like this Seattle monopoly, and it's like the golden horde of infrastructure on demand. And just don't even, like this, their whole thing is they don't open source anything. None of their employees can tweet. You'll never see an Amazon after dark with a bunch of employees hanging out and talking. Like, that's just not how they roll. So it was interesting that they're like, no, we want to partner a lot. This is really important to us. I'm getting to know Amazon, is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah, it would be awesome if you could really teach them about your roadmap, and then they could figure out what exactly they need to build to get 80% of the way there.
So you back me up, Tony, that my first instinct should not be that Amazon's a great partner company.
No, they love to partner, no question about it. And from your point of view, it gets you a lot of reach and a lot of opportunity for people who want to be on AWS, but it's got its downsides as well as its upsides. As does everything.
Yeah.
All about the trade-offs.
We were trying to ask Donnie a secret earlier, but he was unavailable. Maybe someone can coax a secret out of him now.
He's in hiding.
Where are you gonna work, Donnie?
All you got to do is check that lower third, man. That's as far as it's going until next week.
It says right there, TBA. So we just have to figure out what the acronym TBA means.
I think that's a bank in Canada.
All right, we're gonna be going up to 90 minutes if we start another topic. Who has work tomorrow?
Nope, unemployed this week, so I'm good.
You're in for another one?
I have a flight tomorrow, and like 7 nieces and nephews under the age of 4 who will probably be screaming at 6 in the morning. It'll be fantastic.
That sounds like my house every morning.
It sounds like my house never.
So unless something that has to get off your chest, maybe we should go to sleep.
Probably should.
Going once? Going twice?
Thanks everyone for joining.
After dark. Thank you.